Top story at 9 today. Shaun Abrahams will know whether he remains the NPA's chief or not. The Constitutional Court is set to hand down judgment on his appointment. Earlier this year, it reserved judgment on an application to confirm 2 High Court orders.
The orders declared his appointment invalid. Some political analysts want the head of prosecutions to be appointed through a parliamentary process in order to avoid the controversial appointments said to have been made by former President Jacob Zuma. We're now joined live by our reporter Nthakoana Ngatane. She's at the Constitutional Court. Nthakoana, a very good morning to you. Can you please set the scene for us for this morning in terms of Shaun Abrahams?
Well, good morning, Desiree. What I can tell you is that there is a lot of media attention in terms of this particular case here in the Constitutional Court. But what one wonders, though, is if South Africans really understand the importance of it. And as you've said, analysts have said that it has wider-reaching consequences in terms of its outcome, in terms of how the law is applied to appointing a head of the National Prosecuting Authority. This is a body that is established by the Constitution as part of the criminal justice system in South Africa, a very important one at that. But we have seen over the years many people just come and go at the helm of that institution. Now, if you look at a country like Zimbabwe, for instance, only last week, Desiree, we heard when President Emmerson Mnangagwa proclaimed that he had intervened to get his opponent, or the member of the opposition there, Tendai Biti, to be released by police. People coming out to say, is he now admitting that he is in fact interfering with the judiciary in that country? So this is an issue that is considered quite seriously. Now, even though the Act, the National Prosecuting Act of South Africa, says that the president has the power to appoint the national head of the National Prosecuting Authority, but now people are beginning to wonder, especially with a president who may have been conflicted or not, because he was facing charges, and it is not clear whether he would have used his being conflicted in the appointments or not. And therefore, this is probably why some of the people, especially analysts, professors in law, professors in political science, are saying South Africa perhaps should reconsider in terms of having the appointments of the head of the National Prosecuting Authority, but also maybe it should be in line with other Section 9 institutions. You know that Chapter 9 institutions like the Public Protector, we see very thorough processes in terms of how the Public Protector is appointed. But in terms of the head of the National Prosecuting Authority, it's still done behind closed doors, and particularly by one office, or at least the President and the Minister of Justice at best. Desiree?
Taking into consideration what you've just said, Nthakoana, is this why some analysts say President Cyril Ramaphosa needs to do something about Shaun Abrahams, regardless of the outcomes of the court decision today?
Well, I suppose this is particularly the reason why we saw these civic societies taking this matter to the court, because even though it had been ruled on by the North Gauteng High Court, looking at seriousness and the fact that the president at the time, President Jacob Zuma, wanted to appeal that judgment, but also he was saying his reason for that was because, of course, as a president, he's given the right to appoint the head of the National Prosecuting Authority, so he wanted the matter to reach its logical conclusion. But of course, as I say, some say that because he may have been conflicted, we cannot say he was, but there is a possibility that because he was facing charges, and of course Mxolisi Nxasana said when he spoke to SABC News when this case came to the Constitutional Court, he revealed, and to this court as well, that in fact the reason he left office was because he felt that the president was afraid he would charge him, and so this is the reason why he made his life uncomfortable, or his position uncomfortable in that position. So these are some of the issues, I suppose, that this court will have to take into consideration. Perhaps, probably the reason why it has taken this long for this court to come to a decision, because the matter was heard in February.
Nthakoana, have you been able to talk to any analyst in terms of scenario planning? What happens if he goes? What happens if he stays?
Not at this point in time, but I heard Professor Guto speaking to us last night, and he was saying that exactly what you're saying, Desiree, in terms of how it is that this matter should be handled, perhaps Parliament should then look at changing the Act itself, so that instead of saying that the President is the one who should appoint, it should maybe be like other Chapter 9 institutions, and it should say specifically that Parliament should be the one that appoints. But in terms of what happens after this one, we really don't know.
Nthakoana Ngatane talking to us from the Constitutional Court. That's a story we're following this morning, the Constitutional Court decision on whether Shaun Abrahams' appointment was lawful or not.
Yeah, we understand that proceedings should kick off around 10 o'clock, so we'll try to go there live.
Stay with us for that.
Well, the death toll from Saturday's